The Sega Mega Drive, one of the greatest game consoles of all time, and the greatest selling Sega device ever made. While this platform was hugely popular in both North and South America, Europe and Australia, in rather surprising fashion the system came in third place in the console wars in Japan behind both the Super Famicom and PC Engine. Despite these shortcomings, this did not stop Sega releasing a plethora of games for the platform that were only made available in Japan. So today we are going to celebrate 60 of these fantastic entries. This, ladies and gentlemen, is 60 great Sega Mega Drive games you couldn't play. Yeah! Twinkle Tower is a high-quality top-down run-and-gun developed by Zap Corporation. This 1992 adventure takes place in the fantasy world of Arthurian and lets players take control of a young apprentice magician named Saria, who is on a quest to rescue the great wizards of her land from a dark sorcerer known as Gadu. The game is predominantly solid run-and-gun action mixed with a dash of exploration elements. The title is celebrated amongst importers for its detailed presentation, colourful visuals and fantastic replay value. Fan translations even exist now to improve on this experience. Galley-Lancer, published by Masaya in 1992, is a scrolling space shooter. While having elements in common with many other games from the genre, the game has some great features, for example being able to toggle through 4 different speeds, and a starting point can be chosen in the game's options. To add to the experience, the story is told through manga-style panel illustrations, with similar art present to that of Phantasy Star 4. Overall, this is good Japanese shooty space shooter fun. King Colossus is an action-adventure game developed and published as a first-party Sega game in 1992. The game features a similar playstyle to Nintendo's Legend of Zelda and Link's to the Past, and allows gamers to play as a young fighter raised by a local wise man in a fantasy world. Gamers explore caves and dungeons, dispatching terrible monsters in a quest to rid the world of evil. The game includes elements you would expect from a Zelda clone, including real-time combat and light role-playing elements, which thankfully, due to a fan translation, can now be enjoyed in full English. Snow Bros was one of my favourite arcade games growing up. For Japanese players, this Toaplan developed game was converted by Tengen for the Sega Mega Drive in 1993. The game offers an amazing bubble-bobble-like experience, with 50 unique stages with some rather interesting gameplay mechanics. Basically, players can throw snow at enemies until each one is completely covered and turned into a snowball. Players can then roll said snowballs, which will rebound off of walls, killing enemies along the way, until eventually shattering against the walls. Snow Bros is a satisfying experience. AMD Puzzle and Action Tantar is a wacky 1994 release developed and published by Sega. This fantastic underrated gem features insane gameplay that can only be compared to Nintendo's famous WarioWare series that would not debut until nearly a decade later. This crazy spin-off of the Bonanza Brothers franchise features mini-games galore, resulting in one of the most unique games in the Mega Drive's entire library. I am sure you can all find plenty of amusement in this Japanese insanity. Langrisa 2 was a sequel to a game released as Warsong in North America. This 1994 tactical role-playing game by Masaya Games features similar gameplay to Nintendo's Fire Emblem series or Sega's own Shining Force games. Langrisa 2 offers a choice of story paths and players can switch allegiances between factions, an element that the Fire Emblem franchise would experiment with years later. 2008 finally saw an English full translation of this game, so now we can all play it. Wanny Wanny World is a reskin of a Game Gear game that is known internationally as Berlin Wall. In this whimsical affair, players play as a small crocodile and must guide him through levels featuring ladders and platforms. In order to complete stages, players must make holes in the ground so that enemies fall through them. So I guess in many ways that this title is somewhat of an Ice Climbers clone. In terms of the Mega Drive library, this game certainly brings more variety to the system. Golden Axe 3, in its physical cartridge form, was only on sale in Japan. I have produced an in-depth video on this game before, and although it is nothing groundbreaking, it still offers a decent experience. The game mixes up play from what previous Golden Axe games delivered, including offering branching gameplay paths and more fighters than ever. Personally, I do not think this game looks close to as beautiful as Streets of Rage 2 or 3, but it is still a decent affair for what it's worth. Wonder Boy 6 Monster World 4 is a high quality adventure offering an experience akin to Wonder Boy 3 The Dragon's Trap. In this mixture of action-adventure platforming and RPG mechanics, you take control of a female protagonist for the first time in the series. Throughout this title, you traverse 2D landscapes fighting a variety of monsters as well as interacting with non-playable characters. The best way to describe this title is Zelda 2 done right, so it's a game that must be played. Megapanel at quick glance is a puzzle game with many similarities to Tetris, as it's a game that involves reconfiguring blocks and making rows in order to make the blocks disappear and gain points. There are enough major differences though to give this game enough credibility to stand on its own 2 feet, or should I say blocks. In this game all blocks are the same shape, squares, but vary in colour and must be shuffled about to pair up with matching blocks. The game is a fun addictive time waster, so if you are into this sort of thing, check it out! What may come as a surprise to some is that Tetris itself was published on the Mega Drive. This Sega published game was extremely rare and sought after, as the majority of copies were recalled and destroyed due to Sega hearing that Nintendo had acquired the Tetris home license. Some even say less than 10 copies of the game still exist in the world, and the incident contributed significantly to anti-Nintendo sentiment amongst Sega fans. Instead, Sega would create their own Tetris-like franchise known as Columns, a series many Sega fans claim to prefer anyway. Personally, I still love Tetris best, and believe it or not, it is on the Mega Drive. Rent a Hero is an action RPG developed by Sega AM2 in 1991, and has a large emphasis on humour. It follows Taro Yamada, a hero for hire that needs to complete various tasks to save the day. Instead of using standard turn-based battles like in most RPGs, fights in Rent a Hero on the other hand handle in a similar format to fights in side-scrolling beat-em-ups. This bizarre game is definitely unique, and is exactly the sort of gem we have come to expect from the likes of Sega over the years. Pulseman, like Golden Axe 3 on this list before it, is a game that only saw a physical release in Japan. Believe it or not, this game was developed by Game Freak, the same people who brought us Pokemon of all things. The game functions as a great looking 2D side-scrolling platformer, where Pulseman must make his way through various challenging platforming affairs. The game is clean, crisp, and one of the most unique looking platformers available on the system. Curse is an early 1989 Sega Mega Drive shoot 'em up that was never released in the West. The game offers some bright and vivid aesthetics as players take control of a craft trying to save an alien planet from destruction. The planet's neighbours mysteriously change from an ally to an enemy, so it is your job to shoot down as many enemy ships as possible in this horizontally scrolling affair. Dragon Slayer Ayu Densetsu was released on a number of different platforms, but in terms of the Mega Drive's release, it was only available in Japan. The title is the first entry in the Legend of Heroes sub-series, which forms part of the greater Dragon Slayer series itself. While the Mega Drive, or Genesis as it's known in North America, was always an amazing system, if it was short of anything in our regions, it was certainly a good selection of decent RPGs. The Japan-only library though makes up for some of these international shortcomings. Magical Flying Hat is a crazy platformer loosely based on the Master System game known as Psycho Fox, and this colourful platformer remains decent. Magical Hat has a good feel to it, including decent controls and high playability. Magical Hat in this particularly whimsical looking form exists purely in Japan, as for some reason in the West they would reskin the game and make it all a little more edgy, giving us the Cap Attack instead. But if you want to play this game the way it was intended to be played, then try out Magical Flying Hat. Panorama Cotton is a 1994 shoot 'em up published by Samsung. It is the third game in the Cotton series where you control a witch in shooty action. While most of the games in the series are horizontal shooters, this one is different as it contains a unique visual style that diverts from the gameplay found in other Cotton games, giving this entry somewhat of a Space Harrier vibe to the experience. For an extra layer of excitement, the game includes a promotional teacup, which is rare and sought after today. But as a proud British man, I feel compelled to find one, so that I can add it to my personal tea set. Yeah! Slapfight MD is a 1993 shoot 'em up game published by Tengen. Interestingly, if you purchased one of these cartridges, it would include 2 titles on one cart. Firstly, the 1986 original horizontal shooter, with the inclusion of both a remixed and original soundtrack, and of course a brand new game known as Slapfight MD. Both of these titles feature the same style gameplay mechanics, but the new levels, graphics and music deliver a new experience. This is reportedly one of the rarer Mega Drive games, with, once again reportedly, only 5,000 copies ever being sold. Pepenga Pengo is a game featuring the classic Sega character known as Pengo, who is often overlooked now. Pingo's 1996 outing offers everything you could possibly want from a game in his series, of course including fantastic single screen maze chases, amazing audio visual married up with rock solid gameplay. Like Slapfight MD that I just spoke of, this game too includes the arcade original as extra content, so why not try your best to hunt this one down. Vixen 357 is a Mega Drive game that includes many turn-based battles that take place on a grid-style battlefield. This is another Mega Drive title that follows the formula that is implemented today in the beloved Fire Emblem franchise. This means that the game does not include an exploratory overworld, just lots of chess-like battles to indulge yourself in. Dangerous Seed is another vertical scrolling shooter, originally an arcade game that was released by Namco in 1989. The player assumes control of 3 separate ships operated by 3 separate pilots. Each ship has different firing patterns, and all 3 of them can combine together to form a more powerful ship known as the Moondiver. Dangerous Seed is yet another game in this popular Japanese genre where players must stop an alien invasion. Cutie Suzuki no Ringside Angel is a wrestling game published in 1990 by Asmik, one of the development houses who would bring us the amazing WWF No Mercy many years later. In this one you can play as 9 different female pro wrestlers across 4 different gameplay modes, including 2-player action. The game is certainly something completely different to anything found in the West at the time, as although women's wrestling has only recently been heavily pushed by the WWE, the Japanese made it a focal point decades ago. So whether you are interested in the athleticism or you just happen to be a pervert, women's wrestling has something for everyone. Thunder Pro Wrestling Retsuden is notable for being the only game in the critically acclaimed Fire Pro Wrestling series that was made available for the Sega Mega Drive. Interestingly, this one came inches within becoming a US game. The game was set to be reskinned as Jesse the Body Ventura's wrestling superstars. Fortunately, the cancelled Western version of the game has been leaked online for all to try out. Puzzle and Action Ichidanta is the direct sequel to Puzzle and Action Tantar, and subsequently plays in a similar way too. In this 1994 sequel, players must complete a series of mini-games, which of course sees the Bonanza Brothers return in yet another quirky spin-off. This time around, the brothers play the role of knights in a theatre play to help bring to life yet another WarioWare-like experience on the Sega Mega Drive platform. Marble Madness, that was released in the West for the Genesis Mega Drive, is actually a completely different port of the arcade game to that of what Japanese players would receive. Japan's version of the game was converted by Tengen, Atari of Japan's home console division. Tengen's Marble Madness, produced in 1993, is different to the one put out by Electronic Arts in the West, and according to many, the Tengen version is much better too. In fact, it is confirmably closer to the arcade original, as it featured trackball support from the Tengen mouse. Bisujo Senshi Sailor Moon is a game from one of our favourite genres on this channel, arcade beat-em-ups. In this game, based on the successful Sailor Moon anime and manga series, players take control of one of 5 heroines, as they brawl their way through stages akin to the style of action found in Streets of Rage and Golden Axe. The game fits right in on the Mega Drive platform, so it's a shame really that this game never made it into the Anglosphere. I guess the Sailor Moon brand was yet to be established in most Western markets. Space Battleship Gamora is a 1990 horizontal scrolling shooter arcade game that was later ported to the Mega Drive. While the game is essentially a standard horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, it has an innovation that makes this conversion unique. Basically, the game has been improved upon to include parallax scrolling, giving this game a layer of additional visual appeal. As you would have seen from this list, this is just one of many games of this style that was left in Japan. Harry Manada is a 1993 sumo wrestling game produced by Sega that was created as a tie-in to the TV Tokyo anime of the same name. The game follows some typical fighting game tropes, such as including depletable life bars, but obviously this game follows the rules of sumo contests. Players can take advantage of various button combinations to execute different throws and remove opponents from the ring. As you will know, sumo is a popular sport in Japan that has never managed to pick up the same level of appeal elsewhere, so it is no wonder we missed out on this. Dan Megami Tanjo is interesting, to say the very least. This 1991 platforming action game published by IGS sees the player take control of Dana, a woman who is in a struggle against the powers of an evil sorceress who raids her village. The main story is told through cutscenes, but in the platforming action, Dana is helped along the way by various different beasts that she can ride and control. The game offers solid hack and slash platforming and is certainly worth your time to try out. Fire Mustang is a 1991 vertically scrolling shoot 'em up, which is a port of the 1990 arcade game USA AF Mustang. The game offers a refreshing change of aesthetics to many other shoot 'em ups on today's list, as this game does not take place in a futuristic space environment, which is a welcome change. Rather peculiarly for a Japan-only game, you take control of an American plane fighting against the Japanese and Germans in World War II, which is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Shuranomon is a quirky 1992 strategic fighting game by Sega. The game is a menu-driven fighter and you move around the field while a meter on the left side of the screen rises. Once your meter is high enough, it is the right time to attack. The game is based on the Japanese manga series of the same name. The story centres around a fighter who is a master of dangerous techniques. His goal is to find a fighter stronger than him and to protect his dark past along the way. There is literally nothing Western about this game, which makes it no surprise that we missed out on it. New Zealand Story was originally an arcade game developed by Taito in 1988. When it comes to its appearance on the Mega Drive, only the Japanese were treated to this release. Speaking of New Zealand Story, the Amiga version of the game was a huge hit in the United Kingdom, with many gamers looking at the title as the computer's answer to Super Mario Bros. I feel this game had the potential to be a hit anywhere in the world. When it comes to the Mega Drive conversion, it is unique in that it includes levels based on the prototype of the arcade version, meaning it is further differentiated. Eliminate Down is a 1993 horizontal scrolling shooter video game published by Softvision International. Like well-known game Hellfire, Eliminate Down gives players immediate access to 3 directional-based weapons that can all be powered up to use against strange alien enemies through 8 different enormous stages. The game is horrendously difficult though, as the game does not feature a checkpoint system, which makes a game from an already difficult genre even more devilishly challenging. Rainbow Islands Extra is an updated version of Rainbow Islands The Story of Bubble Bobble 2, released exclusively on the Mega Drive in 1990. The game features an original and extra version of the game, which are both selectable in the options menu. Like in the arcade classic, in this game players create rainbows to defeat enemies, then make their way to the top of the screen. I speculate that maybe this game was too cheerful and wholesome to be marketed on the Mega Drive in the West, a region where they were marketing the system as if it were an edgy teenager. Crayon Shin-chan Arashi no Yobu Enji is a title based off of the Crayon Shin-chan anime. The game was originally a 1993 action game for the Super Famicom by Bandai. The game was ported to the Sega Mega Drive in 1994. The game features the objective of speaking to various townsfolk who will activate objects for the player. The game is really a glorified scavenger hunt and amongst one of the most bloody Japanese looking games on this list. At least I guess it is true to the source material. Phantasy Star Fukokuban is a rather strange porting of Phantasy Star to the Japanese Sega Mega Drive from the Sega Master System. This legendary JRPG is playable on the Mega Drive cartridge over there. However, rather than receiving a Super Mario All-Star style upgrade to the graphics, the title is literally the old Master System game chucked onto a Mega Drive cartridge ready to play on the 16-bit hardware. This in turn means it is no different than playing the Master System game using a power-based converter. However, bearing in mind the game's quality, it is worth placing on today's list. Battlemania Dai Jinjo, often referred to as Battlemania 2, is a shoot 'em up developed and published by Vic Tokai in 1993. It is the sequel to the original Battlemania that in fact did see an overseas release. Gameplay in this one is identical to the original game, however unlike the first one, there is not a choice as to which special weapon you start with. Still though, this is a bright, colourful game that offers a different aesthetic to most other horizontal shooters on the platform. Personally, I think the whole game looks great. Double Dragon 2, a game we have talked about a lot on this channel in the past, sees a release on the Japanese Sega Mega Drive. The port by Powersoft is vastly different to its NES counterpart, in that it tries its hardest to replicate the action of the arcade game, rather than attempting to walk its own path. All in all, doing a pretty impressive job in the process, resulting in a very decent conversion. It is of note that the West only received the first and third Double Dragon game on the Mega Drive, so if you're wondering what happened to Double Dragon 2, well, it got stuck in Japan. Heavy Unit's Mega Drive Special is a 1990 shoot 'em up developed by Kaneko. Exclusive Japanese space shooters continue to frequent this list. This game is a modified port of Kaneko's 1988 arcade game Heavy Unit. Heavy Unit Mega Drive Special features the same levels as its arcade counterpart, but featured modified enemy placements, patterns and behaviours, making the Mega Drive experience unique. Magical Tararuto-kun is a 1992 action game by Sega and Game Freak, the same combination that brought us Pulseman for the platform. Magical Tararuto-kun is tied to a manga of the same name and features beautiful platforming gameplay and some of the brightest and most vivid cartoonish graphics on the whole platform. This is simply wonderful. Momono Hunter Yoko Dai 7 no Kaishu, a game with a stupid Japanese name, published by Klon, is a 1991 adaptation of yet another manga and anime series. In this game's case, Devil Hunter Yoko, the game is a side-scroller with hacky-slashy elements, where players take the role of Yoko who wields a very sharp sword. The game presents a fun, fairly straightforward action experience that you may want to try out if you find you have some spare time. XDR is the next bloody shoot 'em up on this list because clearly Japan loves them so much that they selfishly did not want the rest of the world to experience these games. Well, that's my theory at least. The game is horizontally scrolling and presents once again much of what you would expect from games from this genre. Maybe there is a slight possibility that they thought in the West that a system could have too many space shooters. Let me know your thoughts. Fujiji no Umi no Nadia is a 1991 adventure game by Namco. This game is based on the anime series Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, and the game is viewed from an overhead 2D perspective. The game involves exploring the world, speaking to people and solving puzzles to advance, kind of like the mechanics found in point and click adventure games in the West, only this game does not include a mouse arrow. Dragon Slayer The Legend of Heroes 2 is a role-playing video game developed by Nihon Falcom Corporation and is the second entry in the Mega Drive sub-series. This Legend of Heroes game is set sometime after the game's hero, Prince Elias from the previous game, had defeated the demon god, bringing peace to the world. The game brings the same sort of action to the table to that of which we mentioned with the other Dragon Slayer game earlier in the video. Battle Go for Yui is a 1991 golf RPG developed by Santos. This means the game combines both golfing and RPG elements together, years before the Mario Golf, Game Boy Color and Advance titles did exactly the same thing. The game features a story where the playable character enters a golf tournament run by a mad professor as a legitimate front. Players can use special golf abilities at a certain cost, kind of like MP in a traditional role-playing game. No one can say that this game does not stand out on the system. Darwin 4081 for the Japanese Mega Drive is a port of Super Real Darwin, a 1987 vertical shooter. This version of the game, released in 1990, features many of the tropes we now expect from these games. They have certainly been brought up enough in today's content. But with regards to the name Darwin in this game's title, it is a direct reference to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, as the ship can be evolved to overcome obstacles and enemies. Dino Brothers is a unique 1992 strategy game by CRI. The player must guide an army of dinosaurs to victory against their opponents who are aliens that have invaded Earth. The player's main base and source of life is an egg from which other life forms are spawned. Like in Pikmin, many years later, players can spawn various different types of creatures, holding unique abilities that can be used to gather different objects. In Dino Brothers' case, these objects can be used to grow vegetation, cause disasters and more. This is a novel title. Divine Ceiling is an unlicensed title developed by Studio Frazzy. The game is certainly a weird one, at least by Western standards, as the game contains shoot-'em-up elements mixed with perversion, as players are rewarded with scenes of a damsel in distress removing her clothes. So I guess by Japanese standards, all of this is pretty normal. The game is vertical scrolling shooting with a sci-fi fantasy hentai theme. Players must destroy enemies and end-level bosses to receive their naughty rewards. Fastest One is a racing game that, as one would expect, celebrates the success of Formula 1 by offering a game that simulates such a sport. This 1991 game, like Super Monaco GP, catered for the increase in demand for such games in Japan. This game provides one of the best Formula 1 experiences on the hardware, with many proclaiming it as the best of all the F1 games that are present on the hardware. Puyo Puyo 2 is an early game in the now popular world of Puyo Puyo. This entry in the puzzle series is credited with introducing competitive play to the formula, an element that Puyo Puyo is still renowned for now. The game would be released in a different form in the West, where they attached Sonic branding to the puzzle franchise, instead giving us Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. The Japanese version's characters mainly seem to be little girls, as one assumes that was one of the main markets this title was originally aimed at. Veritex is a shooter of the vertical scrolling variety, as the Japanese love space shooters so much apparently. In a standard affair, the players controlled a Veritex futuristic spaceship on its journey to protect mankind from waves of enemies over 6 different levels. I guess these sort of games are usually great fun, which is why Japan appears to be simply obsessed with them. Surging Aura is a turn-based JRPG featuring a battle system similar to that found in the Dragon Quest series. Many fans at the time were heartbroken to see this game confined to just Japan, which is no surprise considering the title used the same game engine as Phantasy Star 4, the biggest JRPG available on the 16-bit Sega system in Western markets. Sadly, to my knowledge, this game has still never been fully translated into English, so we are still restricted with this one. Mado Monogatari is a first-person dungeon crawler developed by Compile for the system. Interestingly, this awesome game with great aesthetics combined role-playing elements with unique twists. What I mean by this is numeric stats are thrown out of the window and replaced with character facial expressions and sprites to reflect characters' health. All attacks in the game are magic based, which means it includes a Pokemon-like rock, paper, scissors system. Everything about this game is suited for the Japanese market. Undead Line is amazingly cool, and I guess the best way to describe it would be the Sega Mega Drive's answer to Pocky and Rocky. Originally appearing on multiple Japanese home computer formats, the game was converted for the Sega home console by Powsoft. In this one, you play as Leon, a fighter chosen by the king to obtain a spirit before the evil Count Brazen does. Another high quality Japan exclusive. Kujaku O2 Genji Joe, which I'm definitely not pronouncing right, is the second game released for an anime known as King Peacock, and a sequel to the Master System game known as Spellcaster. The game would arrive in the West with its name changed to Mystic Defender, with elements of the game switched out, including a different playable character sprite. This original version of the game is much more Japanese than what we would later get. Streets of Rage 3, known as Bare Knuckle 3 in Japan, is said by many to be much better than the game's Western counterpart. Bare Knuckle features a grittier story and includes the playable characters in their traditional colours. There was also less censorship imposed on the lady sprites, but most importantly the game's difficulty is lowered, making it way more playable and enjoyable for most. To top it off, Ash is playable, the YMCA-like super cool biker who everyone wants to be. Produced in Taiwan and available in Japan, Fengshen is an impressive looking tactical RPG that once again shares some of the mechanics that Fire Emblem and Shining Force brought to the table. However, in my opinion, the graphics and aesthetics in this one are even more beautiful. Thankfully, an English translation is finally available, so we are now at a stage where we can all enjoy Fengshen. Yu Yu Hakusho is a 1994 fighting game developed by the legendary Treasure, the same developers behind the likes of Gunstar Heroes and Radiant Silver Gun. The game, based on a manga of the same name, features fighters who can move horizontally on a 2D battlefield. One-on-one matches are possible, but up to 4 characters can battle simultaneously in a single match, beating Smash Brothers to the punch by many years. The game is the typical experimental greatness which has come to be expected from Treasure, with players even having the ability to leap onto separate horizontal planes in the background, much like in a Fatal Fury game. F1 Circus MD is another game that capitalises off the popularity of F1. This one from Nihon Busan plays from a top-down perspective, resulting in a similar graphical style to the likes of the Micro Machines series. However, F1 Circus is way more fast-paced. This game that followed the release of its arcade counterpart also saw a release on the PC Engine. Hybrid Front is a turn-based strategy game developed and released by Sega themselves in 1994. The best way to describe this game is Sega's answer to Nintendo's Famicom War series, known as Advance Wars in the West. This literally means the game featured grid-based strategy mixed with turn-based combat, proving that sometimes Sega do what Nintendo do, but apparently only in Japan. Boo. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was 60 Sega Mega Drive games that you couldn't play. Thankfully, due to modern emulation, all of these games are now accessible for everyone to enjoy. So I hope today's video brought some great games to light that you were yet to have heard about. If you liked this video, last year I uploaded videos listing off 50 great Japan-only Sega Saturn games and 100 Super Famicom games, so you may want to check out them too. I can make these videos in part due to the amazing people who support this channel on Patreon, allowing me the time to work on these videos full time. Many Patreon backers now have access to 8 additional videos too, so why not check those out if you've already paid for access. Speaking of patrons, huge thank yous go out to Sebastian Velez, Carl Johnson, The Murder of Crows, Heyo Paulo Lopez, Joseph Rasmek, Ben Harradine, Koyama Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinched, Evan Balder, Philip Namph, Cambo Rambo 82, Azrael Warakai, Keith Ferguson, Joaquin Varela, Prince Knight, Michael Cullix, Ego, Jordan Duran, Angel Light 85, Alethea Swanson, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Glenny Glenn, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Aaron McNamara, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sanghi, Ben Dover, Langston Miller, Noob, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Vlaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stu Stewart, James McDonald, Dan Van Dammit, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bow, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazansky, Gunther Hendricks and everybody else who supports this channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, cheerio.